China is one of the most geographically diverse countries in the world. It has plowlands, forests, steppes, deserts, sandbanks, mountainous regions, and plateaus. With all this diversity, there are geographic and geopolitical weaknesses that make China very vulnerable. So in this video, we will continue talking about China's geographic weaknesses. So this is the second part of the series. The first part is in the link in the description, and the third one is coming up soon in a couple of days. Episodes are not interconnected, so you can watch them individually and not miss anything, because honestly, China's geographic problems are very unique and quite significant in their own way. So please subscribe and hit the bell button not to miss the episodes. Historically, Chinese civilizations developed along two axes: the Yellow and Yangtze river systems. As a result of distinct geographical and climate differences, there tended to be a noticeable divergence in the cultural and political nature of the policies and states orbiting the two rivers. Northern Chinese civilizations arose within the North China Plain, the fertile alluvial plain formed by the Yellow sediment deposited along the banks of the Yellow River. The Wei Valley in particular was the power base of many northern Chinese dynasties such as Zhou, Qin, Han, and Tang. All entrenched their capitals here. In terms of climate, the plain is cold and arid, so it is too harsh for rice cultivation. Instead, they grow crops such as millet and wheat. Geographically, the northern China Plain, as the name suggests, is relatively flat. The terrain comprises grasslands and plains, largely unobstructed by mountain ranges. Upon this land, transport and communication by horse were rapid, and the dominance of the mounted cavalry warrior undisputed. By implication, these conditions made it extremely conducive to political centralization and efficient administration. In the north, the plain transitioned gradually to steppes and deserts, from which nomadic conquerors often invaded. This meant that northern Chinese civilizations frequently had to test their mettle against these invaders, and were often reinvigorated from time to time by the influxes of culture, technology, skills, and blood from these militant nomadic tribes, giving rise to a more martial disposition overall. Throughout history, there are many instances of northern Chinese dynasties expanding south or forcibly incorporating southern dynasties. Mao himself followed this paradigm, consolidating his power first in Manchuria and the north, then pushing south. In conclusion, Northern China is a political military entity. In contrast, southern Chinese dynasties emerged along the Yangtze River Valley and especially the Yangtze River Delta, and it became a major hub later after maritime trade became a thing. As early as the spring and autumn period, states such as Wei and Yue coalesced around the delta, and Chu took up the residence along the river basin. The climate of the south was considerably rainier, warmer, and wetter than the north. This enabled the cultivation of rice, which has an extremely high calorie per acre output compared to wheat, 11 million compared to 4 million. Growing rice demanded different methods and modes of organization than growing wheat or millet, and so a more cooperative socio-cultural mindset arose because of that. The landscape of southern China is considerably more hilly and uneven than the north, encompassing river valleys and mountains. Cavalry, so mobile on the North China Plain, therefore had a much more difficult time navigating the terrain further south. With the advent of seaborne trade as opposed to overland trade, the south became more and more economically prosperous. After the Juchen conquered the north, the Song dynasty shifted south and brought with it the center of cultural, economic, and commercial activity. While northern Chinese states and empires tended to be traditional land powers, southern dynasties like the Song experimented more with navies and sea power. Southern China was, therefore, identified with trade, commerce, economics, and agriculture instead of the militarism that defined the north. Throughout Chinese history, this north-south division has made itself apparent again and again through the territorial configuration of dynasties along a north-south axis. As you can see during the Three Kingdoms period, the 16 Kingdoms period, the 5 Dynasties, and 10 Kingdoms period. Interestingly, the North remained united under one dynasty at a time, whereas the South was fragmented into numerous polities. Also, the South is much more linguistically diverse than the Mandarin-speaking North, given that it continues to be a home to a variety of Chinese dialects. This ancient polarization of North and South is much less applicable today, given the existence of military, agriculture, communication, and transportation technology capable of overcoming the tyranny of distance, geography, and climate. Stereotypes of northern and southern people and culture remain, but have largely subsumed under a greater, all-encompassing modern Chinese nationalist identity. The more pertinent division right now pertains to economic disparities between inland and coastal provinces. The coast has historically been associated with great wealth and commerce due to maritime trade, beginning with the southern Song dynasty, but from the dawn of the 20th century onwards, and in particular the late 1970s, after Deng's reforms and globalization, this trend became even more pronounced. As China began to trade more and more with the world, the coastal provinces became increasingly wealthy, while the economies of the inland provinces remained poor and continued to rely on subsistence farming. In the early 20th century, the divergent interests and socio-political orientations of the coastal and interior provinces began to make themselves apparent. The cosmopolitan coastal elite that profited from trade were affiliated with foreign European powers, and in time, the influence of this alliance eclipsed the power of the central government in the coastal provinces. The communists scoffed at Shanghai, saying it is a quote, "whore of imperialism." Eventually, the country collapsed into chaos and civil war. The foreign imperialism and intrusion forced open China's markets and led to prosperity, and this very same prosperity destabilized the nation. No wonder the appeal of communist ideology was as strong as it was, especially inland. Revolution arose from the interior. Mao's solution was to raise a massive peasant army from the interior, liquidate the collaborators, expel the foreigners, and close China to the world. China then lapsed into impoverished equality. When Deng reopened the economy to the world, he began with the coast, and in particular, the south. The old problem re-emerged: massive economic tensions between provinces and a disruptive impact on national unity. The coast is integrated into the global economy and prosperous. The interior is isolated and poor. The coast has the weight of international trade and commerce behind it. The interior has the mass of the Chinese population, 900 million on the inland and 400 million on the coast. The interior wants revenue generated by the coast transferred inland. The coast intends to continue enjoying its profits. The central government therefore has to balance the interests of the inland and coastal provinces, distributing the fruits of economic growth in an equitable way. So paradox is that China relies on its coast as an interface with global commerce, but in doing so, the coastal provinces inevitably became incredibly wealthy, and this economic gap leads to political schism and divide within the country. This brings us to another, greater enduring theme, that of regionalism within the Han core. The opening chapter of the Romance of the Three Kingdoms has a line that goes something like this: "It's a general truism of this world that anything long divided will surely unite, and anything long united will surely divide." As I mentioned, the geopolitical importance of a strong core cannot be understated. It is up to the central government to bridge the numerous aforementioned divisions, such as North versus South, coastal versus interior, and maintain the unity of the core. And this struggle appears to be eternal. Throughout Chinese history, there have been repeated instances where the Han core loses coherence and the central authority collapses in upon itself, and China fragments into a multiplicity of small local polities until after a while a strong central authority re-emerges and imposes its will on the core, uniting it once again. Rural revolts and peasant rebellions, regionalism and warlords are a recurring theme. For example, Taiping Rebellion, Anlushan Rebellion, the Rebellion of the Seven States, and many more, as they always attempt to break away from the central authority or resist efforts at consolidation. This was most recently the case with the early 20th century warlord era, but it happened as early as the late Zhou dynasty, when the power of the Zhou court waned and eventually China disintegrated into numerous independent fiefdoms. The Zhou kings wielded only nominal authority over these entities. Even in times where a strong central authority exists, the regions strain and chafe against the control of the central government, and often a firm hand is needed to bring them to heel and quell rebellious sentiments. Modern China is no exception. The Chinese saying, "The mountains are high and the emperor is far away." It applies even today. The dictates and edicts of the central authority are sometimes distorted, resisted, or even ignored by the local bureaucracy, which tends to be preoccupied with managing local interests and issues. The center is distant, even sometimes detached from the realities on the ground, and struggles to enforce its authority. Beijing is familiar with this challenge when it comes to implementing national economic policies across the provinces today. Furthermore, provincial identities are still extremely strong. Identification with and by province is a pervasive phenomenon in Chinese society. There is a fierce rivalry between and among provinces, especially when it comes to economic growth and performance. They compete ferociously for resources, incentives, and privileges dispensed by the central government, and lobby for and against policies. Regional cliques are prevalent even among the highest echelons of Chinese politics, as the incumbent leader's own province or region is often disproportionately represented in the top leadership. Under Mao, a large number of CCP leaders were peasants from the central China, namely Hubei and Hunan provinces. Deng promoted his own fellow Sichuan officials to high positions. Jiang had his Shanghai gang. In continuing with this trend, a new Shaanxi clique has begun to coalesce around the current president Xi. Beneath its visage of order and stability, modern China therefore still struggles with regionalist impulses manifesting on two levels. First, tensions between the will of the central government and the regional provinces, and the second, tensions among the provinces themselves. These latent centrifugal forces have the potential to destabilize the Han core with disastrous results. This episode is brought to you with the help of these Patreon supporters. If you want to support this channel, head over to Patreon, and thanks to everyone who's supporting. Well, what do you think about China and its future? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Thanks for watching. This is the first part of the Chinese Geographical Weaknesses series. The next video is coming up soon, so please subscribe not to miss the upcoming episode.